In this session we're going to talk about elasticity and give an overview of what this means and areas in which it can be used in economics. The term elasticity simply means responsiveness. If we increase the price of a good, we will want to know how what the effects of this will be on the demand for the good. So if we change the price of a good, we want to try and imagine what are the market implications of that change in price. We don't just change price and keep our fingers crossed. We try to work out what the implications will be. In other words, we want to know how responsive its demand is to the change in price. How responsive the change in demand for a particular product is to the change in its price. Elasticity can be divided up into various subsections. There are different types of elasticity. There's cross-price elasticity of demand. That's elasticity in which we relate the demand for one good to the price of a different good. We have income elasticity, which relates the demand for a good against changes in income. And also we have supply elasticity, which, as the name would suggest, simply looks at how responsive the supply coming onto the market is when the price of the good varies. The concept of price elasticity of demand is simply a measure of the sensitivity of demand to a change in the price of the good. That's a pretty good definition, I suppose, of elasticity of demand. Some sellers may increase the price of their product and yet sell the same amount, while others may increase the price of their product and experience a large fall in sales as a result. So not all items obviously have the same elasticity. Some sellers may be able to increase the price and be fortunate enough not to see a big decline in sales as a consequence. Some sellers may increase the price even by a small amount and experience a large fall in sales. The concept of elasticity is useful in various circumstances. Let's look at indirect taxes, for example. If the government is interested in the price elasticity of demand when setting the levels of indirect taxes. Only items which are inelastic in demand, that is, items that are relatively insensitive to price changes, demand which is insensitive or relatively insensitive to price changes, only those items attract taxes in the budget. For example, tobacco and alcohol and petrol. These are probably the best products to tax, since they will raise the most revenue for the exchequer, for the government, because we as consumers, we will continue to buy these items after the imposition of the tax. If the government imposed a tax on soft drinks, it wouldn't affect us a lot. We would simply find some alternative and switch away from the product. So the government has to find certain products that we will purchase even when the tax is imposed. Price setting. Well, it's very important that people who are setting prices can estimate what the likely impact of the price change will be on the market demand. They don't just change the price and think about it afterwards. It has to be thought out before it happens. They want to know how sensitive the demand is to the price change. And obviously the more sensitive it is to a price change, the more reluctant they will be to increase their prices. So price setters are extremely keen on working out the elasticity of demand. Another use may sound a bit obscure, but the governments are interested in the context of exchange rates. This is a slightly more sophisticated point. When exchange rates move, it changes the price of imports and exports. So when the exchange rate falls, for example, imports become more expensive and exports become cheaper. The government will want to know how sensitive our demand for imports is before it changes the exchange rate, or before it allows the exchange rate to move abruptly in any one direction. So it's important that the government has some idea about our elasticity for imports. Now, the slope of demand curve does not indicate its elasticity. Many students of economics make the mistake of thinking that by looking at a demand curve you can tell whether it's elastic or inelastic. Elastic means greater than 1 when you measure it, and inelastic means less than 1. We'll show how it's calculated later, but just for a moment, when I talk about elastic and inelastic, that's what I mean. When we study elasticity, we must bear in mind that the slope of a straight line demand curve is no indication of its elasticity. So even though we draw a nice straight line demand curve with different gradients and so on, we can't say what the elasticity of demand is from looking at the demand. In general, the scale of the axis and the location of the curve and the position of the curve will all determine the elasticity figure. Let's look at these two situations here. Here we have two demand curves just to represent this. Now both demand curves represent the demand for a particular product. However, both demand curves have a different quantity scale. So one diagram may be measured in tons. For example, the diagram on the left may be measured in tons, while the other diagram may be measured in kilograms. The diagram on the right looks more responsive or more elastic. However, this is an illusion because of the scale of the horizontal axis. So the scale of the axis changes the gradient. The one on the right looks like it's very sensitive. When you change the price from P1 to P2, there's a big change in the quantity demanded compared to the diagram on the left. But as I said, that depends on the scale we're using on the axis. It's also the case, of course, that the diagram on the left is radically different from the quantities on the left are radically different from the quantities on the right. On the left we could be measuring the demand for carrots, and on the right we could be measuring the demand for books. These are totally incongruous and can't really be compared. So working out the elasticity of demand by simply observing the two lines doesn't make a lot of sense. They are totally different products. Because of these problems, we use a measure of elasticity which does not have units. So when we work out elasticity, when we do calculations to work out elasticity, which we'll do in a separate video, but when we work out elasticity, we just get a number. We don't get units associated with it. So we just get a number. In fact, by convention, we always get just a positive number. A number somewhere between 0 and infinity. That's just by convention. However, elasticity is just a number. That's the point. And looking or observing the two diagrams doesn't make a lot of sense. So we can't make any statement about elasticity of demand through observation. Okay, that's a brief discussion or introduction to elasticity. There will be further videos in this topic to show how elasticity is calculated and to develop the analysis to a much deeper level. In the meantime, thanks for watching.